So they don't have days off. They go out and bike about 400 k's. So I'm not quite in that category, I don't think.
Ian Kirkpatrick is now dedicating his ride, I think, to Colin Meads, who's, you'll be aware of his condition. Obviously concerns you all at the moment.
Well, I'm not personally aware of everything, but Kirky's mentioned it in the speech last night because obviously Colin Meads was one of his mentors when they might have crossed over when one was finishing and one was starting, and he's got great respect for the man, and he's just had his statue unveiled last week, and that's all wonderful for him. Well, the only thing is, they'll never do a statue for me, but never mind.
They might.
Yeah, some inverted commas, Jim.
Colin Meads coached you, didn't he?
I've touched base with him a few times. He did a couple of All Black trials, yes. So, but he was, he was well and truly finished before I ever came along. But yes, I rubbed shoulders with him a few times. Well,
it's a great effort from all of you. But I want to ask you about a couple of rugby questions just quickly. The Sonny Bill punishment, fair enough in your view? They got it about right. What's your opinion?
Well, on the night, I thought the referee didn't get it right, but that's only me in the stand, and he's been through the judiciary, and they've looked at it all. So, and a few of the other guys around here that have looked at it, I haven't seen the replay at all because I've been too busy on my bike. But it's the sentence has been handed out. Move on.
So you weren't that enamoured of the ref?
Well, he's a Frenchman, and I think he thinks everyone's come to watch him referee the game. A good game of rugby is when you finish the game of rugby and you think, who reffed that? That's what I call a good game of rugby. And you could see him on his hands and knees looking into the scrums, and every time he awarded a penalty, he looked like a peacock in full bloom, and I don't like referees like that.
I can see you're not playing anymore, LB.
It's easy to be an armchair critic.
LB, the poised test series now, we tend to treat this as a national failure, what happened at the weekend, but how do you feel about it being 1-1? How do you and the guys on the tour feel about it being 1-1?
Well, I thought it would have been better to be 2-0, but and they say it's going to make for a good game this weekend, which is all true. And let's give full credit to the Lions. They're good at what they do. The modern age games sort of left me behind a bit, but you run into a brick wall most times. They got very good defence. Yes, it's just interesting. It'll be a very good game, but I must say that we were up there 2 weeks ago in Auckland, and it's just a sea of red. There's 22,500 Lion supporters at the game. You sort of wonder where the All Blacks ones are.
I know, huge numbers. Just before you leave us, and all the best for the rest of the ride, because it's a great thing you're doing. I see Tourism New Zealand's launching a new global campaign to encourage visitors into the regions, and of course cycling is a great way to see them. Have you noticed anything especially marvellous, please, along the way so far in Manu Vatuvei or the Wairarapa?
Well, they say it's a lovely view, but when you've got your head down, the arse up and all the sweat in your eyes, I very rarely see anything. But the traffic's been very good to us. New Zealand may be a wee bit suspect in that department. If you're a cyclist, and having said that, the cyclists have got to respect the vehicles on the road too. But we've had no problems along the way. We've got a good group of guys organising us and telling us what we can and can't do. And
excellent. And all the best for it. Out of time now, unfortunately, but always nice to chat. Albie Anderson. Mark Ingles, thank you for being on the panel today.
Thanks, Jim. Keep an eye out for the Huranui Heartland ride.
Okay. And Tracy Bridges, nice to have you with us. Come back again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Checkpoint with John Campbell coming right up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, Tana Pora's legal team heads to court to argue inflation be added to his compensation package. Team New Zealand gets $5 million for the government for its next campaign, kind of tied them over. That's just been announced. A stoush between the Auckland BHP and the family of a little girl who spent her life in Starship Hospital on life support. It's deepening. Should she be able to go home? Labor singled out shelf stackers in its recent immigration policy announcement to cut back on non-skilled work visas. We meet some shelf stackers. We ask, what are Peter Thiel's Palantir doing in New Zealand? And the 1967 All Blacks captain, Sir Brian Lahore, on Colin Meads being sent off then and Sonny Bill Williams 50 years on.
RNZ News at 5. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The High Court in Wellington has been told Teina Pora will suffer another injustice if his payout for wrongful imprisonment is not adjusted for inflation. Mr Pora's lawyers are asking the court to review the amount of money paid to compensate him for the more than 19 and a half years he spent in jail after his wrongful conviction for the rape and murder of Susan Burdett. The $2.5 million compensation was based on 1998 guidelines. One of his lawyers, Gerard McCoy QC, said the Cabinet's decision to not inflation adjust the payment was unlawful and unreasonable, and he said it equated to less than $300 for every day Mr Pora served in jail.
It produces the derisory sum of $11.14. Such is the prescribed value of liberty under the compensation guidelines.
Mr McCoy said that was well under the $15.15 an hour minimum wage payable in this country. Justice Ellis reserved her decision. The government is to invest $5 million in Emirates Team New Zealand to ensure it can retain key staff while planning is underway for the next America's Cup regatta. The Prime Minister Bill English says the investment will go some way towards protecting the valuable intellectual property, experience and skills that rest with key team members. He says it is yet to be seen whether the government will have any say in where the regatta is held.
With these kind of arrangements, there's always the issue of deciding how involved to get in it. You know, they'll have their own set of commercial arrangements. We all have an interest in success of the whole thing. So that'll be discussed once we get further down the road.
Prime Minister Bill English. The government's new social investment agency was launched today, replacing the Ministry of Social Development's Social Investment Unit. The agency will assess whether national social investment approach is working. The Social Investment Minister, Amy Adams, says it will measure whether the social services the government invests in are delivering the best outcomes for people in need.
New Zealanders don't live their lives according to nice government agency lines. When they have a problem, it doesn't sit neatly within the bailiwick of one departmental agency. And the sooner we understand that and change what we do to reflect what's actually going on for them, the better we can work with them.
Amy Adams says the agency is a standalone department with its own chief executive. A Waikato club rugby player is in intensive care at Middlemore Hospital in Auckland after suffering a serious spinal injury in a match on Saturday. A statement from the Waikato Rugby Union says the incident happened in a game between Southern United and Taupari. It appears a Southern United player was tackled and other players subsequently fell on top of him. Waikato Rugby Operations Manager Bill Heslop says play was immediately stopped and the player taken to hospital where he had spinal surgery on Saturday night. A US warship has sailed close to a disputed island in the South China Sea claimed by China. The USS Stetham sailed within 12 nautical miles of Triton Island, which is part of the Paracel Islands. China says the US move is a serious political and military provocation, and it will take all necessary means to defend national sovereignty and security. CNN's Alexandra Field reports.
This is something that Beijing perceives as a military provocation, as a political provocation, a breach of law, frankly. They call it trespassing. They responded right away by sending their own ships and fighter jets to warn off the U.S. vessel. This is just the second such exercise that we have seen under the Trump administration.
Alexandra Field in Beijing. A 3-year UK inquiry into widespread child abuse in Jersey's care system is due to reveal its findings overnight. The independent Jersey Care Inquiry heard that 553 offences took place between 1947 and 2004, with more than half said to have occurred at Hodela Garen Children's Home. Before the inquiry began, a 5-year police investigation into care homes and youth organisations on the island identified 192 potential victims and 151 named suspects. Former care home residents who gave evidence to the inquiry told of physical, emotional and sexual abuse in the care system. It's 5:04. The All Blacks are itching to make amends for Saturday's second Test loss to the British and Irish Lions and would play the series decider today if possible, says halfback Aaron Smith. The three-match series is locked at 1-1 after the Lions' narrow second victory in Wellington on Saturday. The third test is in Auckland this weekend, and Smith says he's looking forward to the extra edge that comes with a series decider.
It's what you play rugby for, these big games, and I could play today. That's how I'm ready to go, but it's like they say, it's about building the week and letting the whole experience, and these are the ones you remember.
Aaron Smith. The veteran Warriors winger Manu Vatuvei is leaving the club to play in the English Super League, according to a British media report. Vatuvei's contracted to the Warriors through to the end of the 2019 season. However, the Guardian newspaper says he's about to join the Salford Red Devils next year. Matt Chatterton reports.
The 31-year-old Vatuvei has played 14 seasons for the Warriors and scored 152 tries in 226 games since making his debut in 2004. However, the 112-kilogram winger has struggled for game time in the NRL's first grade over the past 2 years due to injury and form. He's played just one NRL game this year and spent much of the season in the reserve side. A Warriors spokesperson says they're aware Vatuvei is weighing up his options, but was unwilling to comment on the Salford reports. RNZ understands an announcement confirming the deal is due in the coming days. This is Matt Chatterton.
And that's the news.
A new citizen?
I hope it's an ongoing and enduring interest because we could continue to benefit as a country from that kind of connection.
A new ambassador?
Quite frankly, he's one of the first presidents that actually has kept his word, and people respect that about him.
And a welcome victory.
It looked like the game was won because the All Blacks ran out of steam in those last 10 minutes.
Home and away. Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Espiner, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, a battle of wills. Law professor Nicola Peart on how adult children are increasingly disputing their parents' wills in court. What are the rights of each party? And after 10, Dr. Sharad Paul explains how your genetic makeup can influence the body's response to drugs, stress levels, and even sports preferences. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. For all of the North Island, showers, some heavy in places, clearing this evening and becoming fine in most places tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson and Canterbury, occasional showers about Golden Bay today and tomorrow. Buller and Westland, showers spreading from the south this evening, clearing for Westland tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain spreading north from this evening with snow lowering to 400 metres tonight, followed by showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms and snow down to 200 metres during the morning. And for the Chatham Islands, rain easing to a few showers tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 5:08. You're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. Coming up on the program tonight, the mental health care. We're short of lots of discussion about this over recent weeks. Tonight, some actual numbers expressed in staff. The government puts $5 million into Team New Zealand to tide them over after winning the America's Cup. And shelf stackers who found themselves at the centre of a debate about immigration skills and workers. They've been talked about. We talk to them. Plus, why are Palantir here? But before all of that, Tainapora and the case for increasing his compensation. He will, his lawyers said, suffer yet another injustice if his compensation for wrongful imprisonment is not adjusted for inflation. Now, that was the argument advanced in the High Court in Wellington today as lawyers argued over the $2.5 million settlement Mr Pora got for spending almost 22 years in prison after he was wrongly convicted of raping and murdering Susan Burdett. The retired High Court Judge, Justice Hanson, who recommended last year's payment, also suggested it should include an inflation adjustment, but the government rejected that, leading to today's hearing, of course. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May was there, and she filed this report.
The compensation paid to Tainapora was based on 1998 guidelines that award $100,000 a year for loss of liberty. It also only applied to the time he spent in prison after being convicted, 19 years, 7 months and 13 days. One of his lawyers, Jared McCoy QC, said the Cabinet's decision to not inflation adjust the payment was unlawful and unreasonable. He pointed out the settlement equated to a daily rate under $300 a day.
If that sum is itself divided to get an hourly rate, it produces the derisory sum of $11.14. Such is the prescribed value of liberty under the compensation guidelines.
Mr McCoy said that was well under the $15.15 an hour minimum wage. He said there were 14 separate references in Justice Hanson's report to the question of taking inflation into account, and the judge had suggested not doing so would be anomalous and unjust. Mr McCoy said the Justice Minister Amy Adams had said the Cabinet guidelines do not provide for inflation adjustment, but he pointed out it's not prohibited. He said there was a cruel outcome if it was not taken into account.
The longer you are wrongly imprisoned, the less you will be compensated in real terms. That is the awful injustice which is at the heart of our complaint.
However, the Crown lawyer Paul Rishworth QC said there was only limited scope for judicial review of ex gratia payments such as Tēnā Pora had received. He said the claim by Mr Pora's lawyers that the payment should have been inflation adjusted is essentially a plea that there ought to be a departure in this case from the Cabinet guidelines. Justice Ellis said no one was saying the guidelines should not be applied. They were just saying that in the wider interests of justice, an adjustment should be made, which led to this exchange with Mr Rishworth.
But it could depart from them if it had good reason in the individual case, could it not?
Well, I say that if it did that, then it is changing the scheme that it has.
In the individual case?
Yes, it becomes a scheme for individual cases.
Well, it's always going to be that to some extent, isn't it? Because of all the factors that you've been talking about.
Yes, but...
I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Justice Ellis reserved her decision. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
New figures have shown gaping holes in the country's mental health workforce. Across the country's 16 DHBs, district health boards, there are 55 vacancies for psychiatrists in hospitals, nearly 100 unfilled nurse positions in acute mental health wards, and just under 40 unfilled jobs in crisis assessment teams. Catherine Hutton reports.
2 months ago, mental health advocate Mike King quit the government suicide prevention panel, slating the mental health system as underfunded, under-resourced and over-medicating. He says today's figures won't surprise anyone who works in the sector.
The root of the problem is it's a very stressful area to work in, and people are getting burnt out earlier and earlier. There is an overwhelming need for care for a lot of people, and the system's not coping.
Psychotherapist Carl McDonald, who was behind the People's Mental Health Report, agrees the figures are no surprise. The review canvassed people's experiences, ranging from mental health professionals to those who have personal or family experiences of mental health issues.
The submissions that we received from professionals, which was around about 25-something%, I think, from memory, of our submissions, told of a story of a system that was as difficult for professionals to work in as they'd ever experienced in their professional career. You know, that's from people choosing to leave, as I said, the sector altogether, or people choosing to leave positions, moving from acute wards to community sector.
Carl McDonald says what that means is that nurses have been asked to work a number of double shifts a week, 16 hours a day in an acute psychiatric ward. The chair of the Nurses Organisation's mental health section, Gina Soanes, says nurses continually tell her they are under pressure.
Talking to some of our members that they find that they're continuously under pressure, that there's the expectations that they are always on, doing overtime, things like that, and that the numbers, the turnover is actually puts a lot of pressure on them. The mood seems to be people want to do their best for their work and for the patients, but that they're actually, or the pressure is actually too much for them sometimes.
The chair of the College of Psychiatrists, Dr Mark Lawrence, says doctors play a clear leadership role in assessment and treatment.
If you don't have the expertise in that area, then there are going to be problems. I mean, Health Workforce New Zealand have already predicted that psychiatry is a vulnerable specialty and that they predict that there are going to be greater shortages.
The Health Ministry's Health Workforce New Zealand agency was set up 8 years ago to lead a sector-wide response to the workforce challenges. Gina Soanes says her impression is that attempts to recruit and retain staff are limited. Meanwhile, advocates are pushing for a review into the state of mental health services. Mike King says a royal commission would take too long, and he favours a stocktake of services.
Unless we do a stock take of what's in the system, what's working and what's not working, I would suggest it would be foolhardy to throw more money at it. You don't go shopping without checking the pantry, do you?
The Ministry of Health declined to be interviewed. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
The government will stump up $5 million for Team New Zealand so it can keep key staff in the lead up to the next America's Cup regatta. The Prime Minister billing this as the money will go towards protecting the valuable intellectual property, experience and skills that rest with the team. He says discussions about how much more money the government will put into the event will continue in the run-up to 2021.
The America's Cup is one of these large events which the government would normally work to support in any case, as we have with Cricket World Cup, Rugby World Cup. That's a separate set of considerations from any further government grant to the team, which is a separate matter. And there's likely to be quite a lot of work around the issue of the facilities and infrastructure that would be needed for a cup defence. You know, as we get into the discussions, it's becoming apparent that the issue of whether the government contributes financially is really just one of the issues, and probably the most straightforward, in the sense that you either do it or you don't.
This money was just announced a short time ago. Mr English says it's yet to be seen whether the government will have any say on where the regatta is held.
With these kind of arrangements, there's always the issue of deciding how involved to get in it. You know, they'll have their own set of commercial arrangements. We all have an interest in success of the whole thing. So that'll be discussed once we get further down the road. Look, I don't think it's that realistic to have the actual finals anywhere else, but you know, I've heard various speculation that the team might want to in some way bring the event to aspects of the event to the rest of New Zealand, but it hasn't been discussed in any detail.
Bill English says Auckland will also be hosting APEC, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting that year, which will bring a whole set of demands and complications with it as well. High security around that, of course. We'll have more on the America's Cup after 6 o'clock tonight. It's coming up to 17 minutes past 5. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. At the beginning of last month, when Labor announced its immigration policy, Andrew Little cited supermarket shelf stackers as an example of jobs we should be able to fill without requiring immigrant workers. Low-skilled work, usually at or near the minimum wage. Is that an example of the skill shortage the government has been using to justify high levels of immigration? Andrew Little raised supermarket stackers. Reporters took the example to Bill English to ask him if they were skilled workers. He deflected the question. Go ask the shelf stackers, he said. So we took the Prime Minister's advice and did exactly that. Zach Fleming went and asked shelf stackers themselves how they feel about being singled out as not skilled enough to work in New Zealand.
My name is Gagandeep Singh and I'm basically from India, North Part. And I have started working in New Victoria Park in 2012. I started as a grocery filler, as a grocery assistant, doing the mid-afternoon to midnight.
Grocery filler, shelf stacker. Gagandeep, or Gaga as he's known to friends, originally came to New Zealand to study.
I wasn't a plan to settle down, but slowly has been making me feel like this is a country where I want to live.
So he decided to stay. He's worked his way up in the 5 years he's been working. Now a grocery manager, a walkie-talkie constantly crackles at his hip. His boss says he's one of the hardest workers there. But if both the Labour Party and the National Party go ahead with their planned immigration policy changes, a future immigrant like Gaga would find it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to start at the bottom and work his or her way up. Here's what Andrew Little said when he announced Labour's plans to cut migration by 20 to 30,000 people a year.
I do not believe that with 90,000 young people with no work, that we do not have amongst that number 100 shelf stackers.
Reporters then asked Prime Minister Bill English to defend visas for shelf stackers.
Why he'd be quite so demeaning about shelf stackers is beyond me. If you go to the supermarket and there's no shelf stackers, there's nothing on the shelf to buy. That's a pretty fundamental process in an economy.
Mr English was asked whether stacking shelves was a skilled job.
Well, go and ask the shelf stackers.
And the shelf stackers Checkpoint spoke to acknowledged it's a job almost anyone physically able can do. But as Mr English pointed out, they said that it doesn't make it any less important.
You advertise the job to all New Zealanders, and predominantly it's migrants that are applying.
Jason Witahira owns the Victoria Park New World and is Gaga's boss. I asked him what will happen if he's forced to ignore migrant applicants.
I'd struggle immensely, and it's, you know, the first people I want to give a job to are New Zealanders, you know, whānau first. But at the end of the day, you can open the door, you can't force them to walk through it. And unfortunately, it's not as easy as what some people think.
He says often migrants are more committed.
The hours of work or the time of work, they're not questioning. Whereas some of the New Zealand residents don't want to start at 3 in the morning or don't want to finish at 12 at night.
Som Kadam is in that category. He came to New Zealand 14 years ago.
I was an assistant baker that said I'm doing the weekends only, scraping the trays, mopping the floor and everything. Hi Joel, how you doing, mate?
He's worked his way up and is now a bakery manager at Pack and Save in Pukekohe. He lives in Manukau with his wife and 2-year-old daughter and says immigrants should be judged on how hard they work, not what job they're doing.
Someone is hard working, then he is, not because he's Indian or he's Kiwi. Nah, I think that's the wrong way to put someone in a box. Yeah, it's either you are a good worker, hard worker, or you're not. That's it. Simple as that.
Both Som and Gaga regularly work 10 to 12-hour shifts. I asked them what they thought of Mr. Little's speech.
I think that's wrong because look at the owner-operator of this store. He started pushing the trolleys, stacking the shelves. That's just the wrong philosophy, man. I started with scraping the trays and now I manage the 17 staffs.
End of the day, we all are human beings and we all got the same feelings. And I don't think it's to saying that immigrants coming over and taking over. Personally, I just thought like it's not right. So if you are genuine and you're doing the right thing, you definitely deserve to stay.
Som says he doesn't think Labour nor the government have thought hard enough about their immigration policies.
Can't find the people locally and we can't train enough or get them onto the boat fast enough, then we need to fill in the gaps. Who's going to work those hours? Who's going to put the products on the shelf, you know? It's a business, so we got to sell the product. And if we don't have the product, what are we going to sell? Empty shelves? Government gets the revenue from selling products, GST, I guess, and then how is he going to get the money if there's nothing on the shelf to sell?
Jason Wutahira says at the end of the day, he'll abide by the law.
I respect the government for the decisions, and they've got to make some hard decisions for the benefit of all New Zealanders, and that's their job. So I don't disagree black and white with some of their decisions. It's just that when you're in business and you're trying to create a culture of unity and moving forward and serving your community that's diverse as well, it gets a bit hard sometimes.
He just hopes the law allows him to employ migrants. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Labour leader Andrew Little is on the phone. You've been listening to that. Andrew, are you there?
I am here. Good afternoon.
Nice to talk to you. Thank you for joining us. What do you make of that? What do you make of what those supermarket shelf stackers were saying?
Yeah, John, let's be honest about this. You didn't, or your reporter didn't talk to supermarket shelf stackers. He talked to an assistant manager who was a shelf stacker 5 years ago.
Exactly, but isn't that the point?
Shelf stacker some 4 years ago.
Yeah, but they both started as supermarket shelf stackers, right?
Yeah, that's right, and good on them. And look, and of course they're doing fantastic stuff. And the supermarket owner himself talked about that, and even he said, look, you know, he starts with whānau first or Kiwis first, and good on them for doing that. You see, the thing that's changed since they came here and were shelf stackers is that we've had a quadrupling of the numbers of people coming here to settle here on work visas and student visas and all the rest of it, into cities where we're struggling with the number of houses to accommodate people, where we have traffic congestion, where we have overcrowded schools. So something has changed, which is why I've said right now, given the current circumstances, we have to take a breather. We've got to slow it down. When I look at the other side of it, which is the fact that we've got 90,000 young people not in work educational training, over 30,000 of them in Auckland alone, I have a moral duty as a political leader to make sure we are doing everything we can to get those people who are already living here a chance and an opportunity to get in the job market and do something.
I don't think anyone would dispute that you have a moral duty, and I'm sure Bill English would say exactly the same thing. The issue is around how you address, fulfil, make that moral duty flesh or practicality or reality, and is picking on immigrants. I mean, Jason Wutahira says unequivocally every time he advertises for jobs, he gets way more immigrants, new immigrants applying than he does from that 90,000 young people that you're talking about, 30,000 of whom in New Zealand. And the issue is what? A lack of confidence, a lack of self-belief, a lack of connection, a lack of possibility, a lack of hope. How do you inspire the youngsters you are talking about to want those jobs, to go for those jobs, to feel those jobs are rewarding, meaningful, worth doing?
Yeah, look, I'll come to that. I just want to make you said the point about why pick on immigrants. No one is picking on immigrants. We have an issue at the moment with a with cities that are kind of bursting at the seams because we just don't have enough houses because we have a government that hasn't invested in the infrastructure needed for that, and we've just got to take a moment to kind of slow it down and take a breather. Here's the issue about a lot of those young people. A lot of them have been out of work for a lengthy period of time, and I've spoken to other employers who've said, look, I want to really employ young New Zealanders, but we get them from WINZ. They've been out of work for 7 or 8 or 9 months, and they last a couple of days or 3 days, and then we don't hear from them.
And that's Jason Witchy-Heda's point, isn't it?
Yeah,
and this is complex, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And look, and Jason May will have the same point, but these farmers and orchardists who spoke to me last year had the point. They said, could you just work with them, give them a period of time to get them ready for work, which is why we have our ready-to-work policy, which is about going after those young people who've been out of work for more than 6 months, giving them something to do, working with DOC, working with a regional council, working with somebody else, doing community stuff, getting them in the habit of turning up to work at the beginning of the day, doing something constructive. If there's things like they don't have a driver's licence that's holding them back, work with them to get their driver's licence. If there's some other short course that they can do that's going to give them an extra skill and make them more competitive in the labour market, we'll do that too. But this is about getting into the habits, restoring self-esteem, motivation and all those things.
All of that stuff. All of that stuff. Now, you announced your immigration policy in June. In May, you wrote a really interesting op-ed for the New Zealand Herald, and you said when 139,000 Kiwis are unemployed, we should be focusing on getting them into these jobs. Now, how do you do that? Is your only response that there's a small amount of job preparation and also just excluding immigrants so that, in fact, employers have no option but to employ Kiwis? What are the nuances around making this work?
Well, that ready-to-work policy is absolutely fundamental to it because, as I say, I go to the employers I've spoken to, and I was in Blenheim the other day and I had employers in the hospitality sector telling me about, the way that, their workforces, and they get skilled chefs from overseas, and that's all good. And we've always said we want an immigration policy that has always done what it has always needed in New Zealand, which is to match genuine skills shortages with, getting people from overseas.
Sorry to interrupt.
Right now.
No, I just want to pick up on genuine skills shortages. What say the genuine skills shortages are perversely and inexplicably and in a very complex way low-skilled jobs. In other words, that is a disenfranchised, disconnected labour force. And also it's a labour force who are asking predominantly to do minimum wage work in a profoundly difficult city to live on the minimum wage in, Auckland.
Sure, but we have people working on the minimum wage in Auckland, and we have over 30,000 young people right now in Auckland not doing anything at all. And so I just go back to what I regard as my moral duty, and that is doing what I need to do, and if I have the privilege of forming a government, and government doing what we need to do to make sure they get a chance and opportunity to get their foot on the bottom of that ladder to get into work, get into the labour market and do stuff. And yep, there will be all sorts of things around. Can they get there? Do they have to travel long distances and all those sorts of things? But I am confident that if we work with those young people, give them the chance to kind of rebuild or regain their confidence, get into those habits of work. If there's other underlying issues we've got to deal with, let's deal with that. But it is not good in the long run for New Zealand to have 90,000 young people who we kind of turn our back on, and we've got at least one politician who describes them as pretty damn hopeless. That's not acceptable to me, and I want to make sure we have a government that is doing everything it can to get those people into work and having the opportunity to work and stand on their own 2 feet.
Andrew Little, Leader of the Labour Party, thank you. We'd love your feedback on this. Text 21001 or email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. 50 years is a long time between red cards. Colin Meads at Murrayfield in Scotland in 1967, Sonny Bill Williams in Wellington on Saturday night. Meads didn't actually get a red card. In those days they just pointed at the sideline and sent you on your way, but he was given his marching orders for recklessly aiming a kick very near Scotland's David Chisholm after having been twice warned for overzealous rucking. Pinetree was sent from the field. Now, the All Blacks captain that day was Sir Brian Lahore. We asked him a short time ago the difference between Pinetree sending off and Sonny Bill's red card on Saturday night.
I don't think there's any comparison. I don't want to get into a slanging match with what happened on Saturday, but what I do know is that Collins was never meant to hurt the guy, and in fact, he never did. He kicked at the ball and the halfback was in the road, and it looked from the referee's vantage point that he kicked at the player. And he ordered him off on that on what he thought he saw. But the player concerned, there was a halfback, came into our dressing room after the game and said, "Look, I'm sorry, he didn't even, kick me."
And Saturday night, what did you make of that?
Oh, it was clumsy, I think. Spur of the moment decision, I guess, and it was it looked bad and it was clumsy.
The thing I'm fascinated by, and lots of people are talking about this, is it's been 50 years between All Blacks being sent off. And I remember, and I'm sure you do too, acts that really looked like, for want of a better term, thuggery. Why is it so rare for people to be sent from the field in rugby?
Well, I don't think people want, if you're a referee, you really wouldn't want to send somebody off in a test match. It makes it uneven, of course. 14 against 15 is pretty tough. Luckily, in our case, in '67, it was pretty much late in the game, and we had reasonable control, so it didn't affect the result. But you can't tell whether it affected the result on Saturday night or not. But it certainly didn't help the All Blacks at all.
No, it didn't help the All Blacks. Although, gosh, the Lions were good on Saturday, and I think this discussion has meant that we haven't probably acknowledged that as explicitly as perhaps we need to. I thought they played very well.
They played a lot better than they did in the first test. I expected them to do that. I expected the All Blacks to be better than they were in the first test, but up to the point where Sonny Bill got ordered off, we hadn't probably played quite, or didn't have quite the control we did have in the first test. But in saying that, they had a very good period in the first 20 minutes of the second half, which looked as if it was going to be sufficient to save the game. But, as the game wears on, 14 against 15 gets harder and harder.
What does this do to Sonny Bill Williams' reputation? And I suspect you are not a big Twitter user and possibly not even a Facebook user, and so you may have missed the discussion about him on social media, but some of it is pretty tough. Does this define him forevermore as an All Black?
I hope it doesn't. I'm sure he's upset with what he did. I don't think he's a thug. I've never seen him in that role ever before. No, and yes, I don't have Facebook or all the other
Twitter
stuff. I feel sorry for him. As I say, it was a spur of the moment decision that he made. It may have probably, in some ways, gone back to the days when he played league and they were allowed to do that sort of thing. But it certainly hurt the All Blacks.
We're coming up to an extraordinary game on Saturday night at Eden Park, 1-1 from a best-of-3 series. Who's going to win it, do you think?
$64,000 question.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's public, right? We haven't got $64,000. I'm so sorry.
I think it's certainly going to be an interesting game. I couldn't pick an absolute winner at this stage. I'm sure the All Blacks will be doing a lot of thinking and working during the week, and they have a good, I suppose, a very good record at Eden Park. But records don't really make a lot of difference to the result of the game, in my opinion.
It's going to be a good one, isn't it?
Yeah, that was great. There won't be many not watching it.
Coming up on Checkpoint, Donald Trump is accused of inciting violence against the media after posting a bizarre video of himself wrestling a man to the ground with a CNN logo superimposed on his head. The parents of a 4-year-old who've spent her whole life in Starship Hospital plead for her to be allowed to return home. Nona is back from Winnipeg with business, but first, Anna Thomas with the headlines.
Taina Pora's lawyers say he will suffer another injustice if his payout from wrongful imprisonment is not adjusted for inflation. Mr Pora's lawyers are asking the High Court in Wellington to review the $2.5 million paid to compensate him for the almost 20 years he spent in jail after his wrongful conviction for rape and murder. One of his lawyers, Jared McCoy QC, says the Cabinet's decision to not inflation adjust the payment was unlawful and unreasonable and equated to less than $300 for every day Mr Pora served in jail. Team New Zealand is to receive $5 million to keep key staff in the lead up to the next America's Cup regatta. The Prime Minister Bill English says the money will help protect the valuable intellectual property, experience and skills that rest with the team. He says talks on how much more money the government could put in will continue in the run-up to the 2021 event. A mini pistol crossbow that shoots sharpened toothpicks or needles has been declared an unsafe toy and removed from sale. The Commerce Commission says anyone who has purchased a crossbow should return it for a refund. YouTube videos show the mini crossbows being fired across a room and bursting a balloon and even a light bulb with a sharpened dart. The Social Investment Agency has been launched today, replacing the Ministry of Social Development's Social Investment Unit. The Social Investment Minister, Amy Adams, says it will measure whether social services are delivering the best outcomes for people in need. And the Arab nations that have slapped a boycott on Qatar have agreed to a 48-hour extension to meet a list of demands. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt accused Qatar of supporting terrorism and being an ally of regional foe Iran. They'd originally given Qatar until today to meet a list of demands or face further sanctions. The ultimatum includes shutting the broadcaster Al Jazeera. And that's the news.
Lots of Kiwis work at Al Jazz, a hell of a lot. Yeah. Thanks, Anna Thomas. Nona's back. Canada's lost. Our game, Nona.
Oh, there you
it's
go.
Lovely to have you home. The two largest telecommunications companies in the country, right? Spark and Vodafone have both announced they are rolling out nationwide networks to connect smart devices and sensors to the Internet of Things.
That's right, Internet of Things.
What's all this about?
Do you know, have you ever heard of the Internet of Things?
Well, it's a stupid phrase in my opinion, but can you explain it to me?
No, yeah, it's actually like the Internet, which most people are familiar with.
Yeah.
The Internet of Things is a network which needs very little grunt to send a message. So it's basically short messages. Say, for example, you've got
Welcome home, Nona.
Well, it would be probably something a little different.
Yeah,
but
right.
maybe you have a wandering sheep. Yeah, so
That's
you
a good Kiwi analogy.
There you go. And
you
can actually keep track of that wandering sheep through the Internet of Things, thinking of a sheep as a thing. But you might also think, oh, does that sheep have enough water? If the water level's low in the watering tank, maybe that will set off a message to the Internet of Things. So it sends a short message, fill me up, I'm getting low. Oh, there's the sheep, it's across the street. And so on. Now, it can also do other things. For example, I've got this tracker on my wrist, which I use to remember how many steps I've walked every day.
Right.
That is used using a different kind of network called Bluetooth, but it could easily be something that would send a message to the Internet of Things. So it's a different kind of internet. It's for an internet where you're not talking to people or, you know, there's no video, etc.
Right.
It's a short message, and so it doesn't need a lot of grunt, doesn't need a lot of power. And it's so it's slightly different and will be at a lower cost.
And Spark and Vodafone both rolling out at the same time.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, they have to.
Yeah, they
because
do.
These days, this is where the Internet of Things are
Yeah.
going. Billions and billions of devices could be attached to the Internet of Things. You can just, you know, whatever your imagination.
Track those sheep to your heart's
Could be
content.
tracking the sheep or just Nona.
Yeah, good.
All right, so that's what it is. And they're going to be spending quite a lot of money. It should be rolled out by the middle of next year. And yeah, and other people are being advised to take notice. Large companies, only 14% of them are investing in the Internet of Things, doing things around that. They need to step up their game or fall behind.
Right. Thanks,
there you
Nona.
go.
Thank you very much. What happened on the markets today?
Okay, well, with the top 50 index, it fell nearly 1/3%. That was down 23 points to 7,588. However, that's just 100 points off the all-time high that was hit last week, right? So, and the dollar also very high, 73.2 US cents, 95.3 Australian, and 56.3 British pence.
In 5 seconds or less, how's the Kiwi-Canada cross, having just been there on
Oh,
holiday?
it was about 96 cents.
Right.
Yes.
So basically the same.
Yeah.
Is Canada more or less expensive than New Zealand?
Well, the avocados were cheaper.
Go, Nona. It's lovely to have you back. To the United States now, where President Donald Trump is being accused of inciting violence against the media. He's posted on Twitter a video of him wrestling to the ground a man with a CNN logo superimposed on his head. Mr. Trump says his tweeting is simply modern-day presidential. The BBC's Tom Burridge has the latest.
From Chicago to Los Angeles to Texas, Americans in 45 cities have spilled onto the streets demanding Donald Trump's removal as president.
But the goal is to get him out.
The Trump regime has got to fall. No ban, no wall,
The Trump regime has got to fall.
Many are demanding no less than Donald Trump's impeachment, some his deportation. But it's clear many Americans are increasingly impatient with the president's performance.
I feel Donald Trump is demeaning the office of the presidency and putting me and my 5 children in danger. And the only thing I have is to put my body on the line.
The protesters give multiple reasons for demanding Donald Trump's removal. Some cite his policies on healthcare and immigration. Others accuse him of violating the US Constitution and obstructing justice, referring to his actions in sacking FBI Director James Comey and allegations he tried to thwart an investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
The worst part about this man is his behavior, the example he sets, and the terrible behavior he encourages. That's why we must get rid of him.
But these latest protests also coincide with the president's worsening feud with the American media, which erupted into a firestorm last week after his tweets attacking MSNBC television hosts Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough. Now, President Trump has tweeted a mock video showing him in a wrestling ring tackling a man with a CNN logo superimposed on his head. The CNN logo is instead FNN, for Fraud News Network. And at an event in Washington, the president renewed his attacks on mainstream media for running fake news.
The fake media is trying to silence us, but we will not let them. Because the people know the truth. The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House. But I'm president and they're not.
But President Trump still has his supporters. A smaller group of pro-Trump protesters gathered in cities including New York and Los Angeles. And Thomas Bossert, the White House Security and Counterterrorism Advisor on America's ABC network, launched a staunch defence of the president in the wake of the CNN video.
I guess my first reaction to that tweet would be the same as any of the president's tweets. There's a lot of cable news shows that reach directly into hundreds of thousands of viewers, and they're really not always very fair to the president. So I'm pretty proud of the president for developing a Twitter and a social media platform where he can talk directly to the American people. In fact, he's the most genuine president and the most non-politician president that we've seen in my lifetime, and he's demonstrated, whatever the content of that particular tweet is or any tweet, he's demonstrated a genuine ability to communicate to the people.
He certainly can communicate to the people, but I want to ask you, is that the kind of communication you want, that he's beating up on somebody?
Well,
that he's beating up on the media?
Right.
You're in charge of Homeland Security there.
Yep.
That seems like a threat.
Yeah, certainly not, though. I think that no one would perceive that as a threat. I hope they don't. But I do think that he's beaten up in a way on cable platforms that he has a right to respond to.
President Trump, in another tweet, defended his use of social media as, quote, modern-day presidential.
That report wasn't from Tom Burridge from the BBC, it was from the ABC's Anne Barker. On Friday, we looked at Peter Thiel and his New Zealand citizenship. Nathan Guy has said he was an ambassador for New Zealand in the world. We attempted to quantify that, and we also spoke to people who'd been here much longer and found citizenship much harder to get. That story is now online. Peter Thiel is co-founder of Palantir Technologies along with Alex Karp and 3 other men. They have an office in Wellington, and the company's office records their adoption of Constitution being in July 2012, a year after Thiel became a New Zealand citizen. Generally, what Palantir do is a poorly kept secret. The Intercept ran an investigation headlined "How Peter Thiel's Palantir Helped the NSA Spy on the Whole World." But the details are buried beneath layers of non-disclosure agreements and the secrecy provisions of intelligence agencies. Still, in the world of mass data capturing, Palantir provides software that sifts and searches and finds through the mass data very fast. So why are they in New Zealand? No one will explicitly say, but if you listen hard enough to Palantir's own sales pitches, you get some idea.
Now, to kick off the program, I would like to introduce Palantir's co-founder and CEO, Dr. Alex Karp.
July 2013, and this is a Palantir roadshow of sorts, playing to clients in Washington, D.C.
We came to this community, especially D.C., with ideas about what it would mean to work with what's now called big data. Of course, at the time, big data wasn't a term. It wasn't even viewed as useful. No one thought we should work with the government. The Valley thought that was not a place to deploy the best engineers.
So Palantir were from Silicon Valley, but working on big data in Washington. But there was a speed bump, essentially a civil liberties one. In short, Palantir appear to have created software with the capacity to do things they weren't necessarily always allowed to do.
How do you make it possible for the end user to do their work while conforming to norms that are implicit in our society and laws that regulate our conduct? And that problem, that was a much meatier, juicier problem than we had ever imagined, and caused us to go back to our investors and say, it's not going to be a 6-month project before we go to market. It's going to be a 3-year project, almost 4-year project. And we did that in iteration with people in Washington and various agencies.
Let's interrupt him there and try and make some sense of what he was saying. Palantir was so ahead of the game, and the private-public data analysis partnership they were forging was so unprecedented that it took time to get it right. Now, commentators believe this was software development, yes, but also the work required to accommodate what Palantir's software was able to do within existing laws. So Palantir worked in capital cities. All 5 Eyes capitals, for example, have Palantir offices. Washington, D.C., London, Ottawa in Canada, Canberra in Australia, and Wellington here in NZ. But doing what? Getting an answer to that question isn't easy, but let's go back to Palantir itself.
Good morning, and welcome to GovCon 7. My name is Saad Abdali, and I'm a forward-deployed engineer here at Palantir Technologies.
We've gone back 2 years to 2011 when Palantir was still explaining what it did, although even then with a caution its clients would appreciate. But here Saad Abdali tells us what Palantir's clients were dealing with.
They lived in a world with a huge amount of data coming in at an increasing rate, and they lived in a world where very quickly they had to make good decisions based on fast analysis.
And here we get to the centre of what Palantir does. Fast analysis of very large amounts of data.
We live in a world with an increasing amount of data and an increasing need to use that data to drive good decisions. And that's what Palantir is all about.
In 2012, Palantir took its roadshow south, a long way south.
My name is James Cleary. I'm a forward deploy engineer here on the Australian team in Palantir. And welcome back to our colleagues in New Zealand. New Zealand is a vital part of our regional focus, a country of innovators, and we're happy to be expanding our presence there with a permanent New Zealand team of forward-deployed engineers.
So the office is here, the engineers are here. Peter Thiel, coincidentally, was spending his 12 days here and getting citizenship. And also at that Australia-New Zealand roadshow was Palantir CEO Alex Karp. And this time he was explicit about who they were working for and their value.
Essentially, the most important clients in the world, as we highly, from a very myopic perspective, defined as people in the 5 Eyes, people doing classified work.
But why Australia and New Zealand? Relatively small markets a long way from Silicon Valley.
These are 2 of the 5 Eyes.
2 of the 5 Eyes, one of which was making Peter Thiel a citizen. The 2 things may well be coincidental, of course. But in 2011-12, Peter Thiel was becoming a citizen. Palantir was opening an office in Wellington, working with the 5 Eyes and visiting to schmooze its clients, some of them government clients. A point Alex Karp ended with when he spoke to Palantir's Australia-New Zealand roadshow in 2012.
Again, the central thing that we want you to understand here is we are not taking our business and moving it to the monetization hedge funds and other things where we would frankly make a lot more money. We are going to double down on Australia and New Zealand, continue to provide you with our best staff, our commitment from our senior leadership, and to continue to innovate against your use cases. And I hope that continues to track as it has in the past, and welcome you again to our GovCon. Thank you.
Alex Karp, Palantir's CEO, promising to make the Palantir office in New Zealand even bigger. It's coming up just 11 minutes to 6. Anna Carolina is a 4-year-old girl whose life takes place inside Starship Hospital. She's almost totally paralysed and requires constant care, including dependence on a ventilator to help her breathe. The daily care she's receiving is beyond reproach, but it's in hospital, and her mum and dad desperately want her home. They're battling to essentially replicate the care she receives in Starship at home. But that requires DHB support, both medical and financial, and the DHB would prefer Anna Carolina remained in Starship at least for a while longer. Now, the DHB wouldn't talk to us, but we understand they're concerned that Anna Carolina is too unwell for home care. Her mum and dad, Eleni and Peter, have asked for supported care at home and think the dispute is about the level of care the hospital is able or prepared to provide.
We believe so. We haven't seen a plan. We have no real information. All we've been able to glean is from documents we've received from the Official Information Act requests. So all their planning's been behind closed doors. So we don't really know what they intend.
Because the hospitals say they are not against Anna Carolina coming home, full stop. It's just they want it done under the right terms, right? So what extra help would you need, Eleni, if your beautiful girl comes home?
Anna Carolina has a life support machine 24/7, and she is paralyzed, not completely. She does have movements, but she will require nursing care, 24/7 nursing care.
And so effectively she would need at home what she's currently got at the hospital.
Exactly, yes.
And it's our clear understanding that that's what's offered in like Adelaide, for example, in Australia. It's well documented in the UK and in Canada. I mean, we bring up Adelaide because it's a city very similar in size to Auckland. They have 5 children on ventilators at home, and they all are offered 24/7 nursing care.
With the state paying exactly as is your expectation here?
Yes, they have. We're not exactly sure how their funding model works, but it's obviously they're a public health system. Like here, they have something called a fragile airway program, which manages all children with a tracheostomy. And children with a tracheostomy vary in the degree of care they need. Some need no care at home at all. Others need maybe 8 hours or just overnight care, and others are through the extreme end where Anna Carolina is, where she needs 24/7. Yeah.
Yes.
And so she's never alone. So right now, for example, you're in here kindly talking to us, and there will be a nurse or someone caring for her in the hospital.
That's right.
And there's always someone with her.
Always.
Yes. And the international, there's an international sort of needs assessment guideline which you fill out and based on a person's requirements, and even the hospital one they managed themselves and produced estimates she needs 160 hours plus of care. So their own tool calculates that. So
160 hours plus.
Well, it's 168 hours is 24 hours.
It's a 7-day week, yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah. So 160. So it's 160 hours or more. So pretty much 24/7.
Yeah. Okay. The hospital's giving her fantastic care at the moment, aren't they? That's not in dispute.
No. I mean, the nurses are excellent. She's obviously thriving, doing very well. We find most of the doctors, especially throughout Starship and the specialists we've met, and the nurses are excellent. And I mean, there's a small group of, I think, of doctors who we don't see eye to eye with, and unfortunately they seem to be having a lot of control. But in general, the care we get at Starship is excellent.
And why don't you see eye to eye with them? Do they have different ideas about Anna Carolina?
It was very clear early on that they felt that she shouldn't be allowed to live, and that and they basically threatened us that they would take us to court and get her life support taken off. Then they looked at that internally. I think the own ethics committee and their legal team, and we approached lawyers, and in the end they backed away from that scenario. But she has remained trapped there for the last 3 years and been stable. And I think those are the people that are in control, and it's our understanding those are the people also making her long-term decisions. And to us that seems like if that's their perspective and thinking, it colours their thinking going forward and how they're planning, because their focus is on ending her life. Our focus is on improving her life.
Is their focus on ending Anna Carolina's life? Because as I look at it, they're spending well in excess of $1 million a year, caring for her 24 hours a day and giving what looks to me like extraordinary care. I mean, it's the very opposite of wanting to end her life, isn't it?
Yes, well, I mean, they have admitted that they didn't expect her to survive. So I think after they made the decision that they should remove her life support, and we rejected that, their position was they would wait.
Peter and Elaine, thank you. If you're listening on the radio, you won't know that sitting very quietly, unusually quietly, David Seymour, besides Peter and Elaine, as they were speaking, Anna Carolina's mum and dad, is also the local MP, David Seymour, ACT Party leader. Thank you for being here. This is an impasse, isn't it? Because the hospital are giving Anna Carolina the best care they possibly can. And I don't think anyone's disputing that. But it's just mum and dad are saying, hey, we want the same thing at home. How can this stalemate be resolved, David Seymour?
Well, can I just start by saying I've met Anna Carolina many times over the past 18 months, and I think the way to characterise her, she's a little battler who's held on and is actually gradually recovering and getting more movement and more responsiveness as time goes on. She's held on, and I think we should too. The way to resolve it, frankly, from the point of view of the taxpayer, from the family, and especially for Anna Carolina herself, is to allow her to go home, as she would in just about any other country New Zealand likes to compare itself with. What has happened is I've watched this over almost 2 years now. It seems that the ADHB and the doctors and nurses at Starship are wonderful people. If you go in there, they'll fix you up as good as anywhere in the world. But handling this long and complex relationship has been quite challenging for them. And I think what needs to happen now is that we need to put in place a person who is above the ADHB and the Ministry of Health and the various institutions involved in transitioning a child home. We're doing this almost for the first time in New Zealand, and we need to set a deadline for getting a plan in place.
Can I come in there almost for the first time? And that speaks to the seriousness of Anna Carolina's condition, right? And I'm sorry, Mum and Dad, to talk about your beautiful daughter like this in front of you. But is the DHB's caution here, in fact, a direct correlation to the fact that this has never happened before, that this is a seriously unwell girl who needs 24/7 care in a hospital environment?
Well, I think the caution is not really what they've applied. What they've applied over a period of time is a bumbling approach that has led to delay after delay in building trust between the ADHB and the family and putting in place a plan to get her home. So it's not actually a case of win-lose. It could be win-win if the ADHB was able to put a plan in place that was clear and trustworthy to get her home at dramatically lower expense than remaining as she is in the Starship Paediatric Intensive Care Unit.
David Seymour, who was the local MP, and before that, Anna Carolina's mum and dad, Peter and Elaine. What did the DHB say? Well, it said it couldn't comment on Anna Carolina's situation without a privacy waiver. We got that privacy waiver today, but the DHB has refused to be interviewed on Checkpoint. We think that's a pity, because clearly they're doing a very good job of caring for her in hospital. The issue is around care at home. A short time ago, we received a statement from the Auckland DHB Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Margaret Wilshire. She says Starship and the wider DHB are focused on what's best for Anna Carolina, and we've been working to enable her to go home since 2014. Throughout that time, we've consistently tried to involve Peter and Elaine in discussions and decisions on their daughter's current and future care. We appreciate it takes some families longer than others to feel confident they have the training and support to take their child home, and it's never easy transitioning home with a severely disabled child. It's not in Anna Carolina's best interest to remain in hospital, and we remain hopeful that with expert advice we will be able to allay her parents' concerns. It's important to note we have a model in New Zealand for supporting parents caring at home for a severely disabled child who's fully dependent on ventilation. There are currently 185 children receiving various levels of ventilator support at home, including 3 who require continuous ventilation as life support. So that's from Dr. Margaret Wilshire. Of course, Anna Carolina is in the position of requiring continuous ventilation as life support. 3 children who are living at home in those circumstances. 2 quite different takes on the situation Anna Carolina is in. Lots of feedback coming in this evening, and I'm just going to tell Anna Thomas, who's sitting beside me, that you can take over that machine. And my great pleasure. Hi, John. I run a small furniture removal company in Wellington with approximately 25 employees. I employ several overseas workers on 1- and 2-year work visas. I find overseas workers have a much better attitude towards work than the Kiwi alternatives like the guy interviewed. I would love to put Kiwis first, but I receive more job applications from immigrants than Kiwis. They're better timekeepers, less likely to smoke dope, and generally have a better all-round attitude to the workplace. This isn't a situation I like having to deal with, but sometimes you have to call a spade, and this is how it is at present. So So that is one point of view, and there are quite a lot of people saying stuff along that line, those lines. We're hearing from employers. But on the other side, and we're getting a lot of feedback along this line too, good evening, let's be honest, the supermarkets love migrant workers because they're the ones who will work for the low wages and poor conditions the supermarkets specialise in. Of course they would struggle to find New Zealanders to do the jobs. So two very different takes on that issue. Thank you for your feedback. We really do appreciate hearing from you. You can text us on 2101 and you can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. After the news, we're going to drill into why the government's just put $5 million into Team New Zealand. The America's Cup is 4 years ago. Who are they trying to keep is the question we're going to try and ask.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Anna Thomas. The Crown says there is limited scope for a court to review ex gratia payments of the kind made to Teina Pora to compensate him for wrongful imprisonment. Mr Pora's lawyers have today asked the High Court in Wellington to review the compensation paid to him for the more than 19.5 years he spent in jail after his wrongful conviction for the rape and murder of Susan Burdett. The $2.5 million compensation was based on 1998 guidelines, but was not inflation adjusted, as recommended by Justice Rodney Hanson. However, the Crown lawyer, Paul Rishworth, QC, told the High Court the guidelines did not allow for that, and while the Cabinet could have decided to make the adjustment, it didn't.
It's not impossible, because Cabinet could do it, but the real question for the court is, given that it's not doing it, what is the legal principle by which you say it's wrong not to do it?
If the starting point is Mr Hanson's comments, the reasons for not doing it have to be coherent and defensible.
Justice Alice reserved her decision. The government is investing $5 million into Team New Zealand so it can keep key staff in the lead up to the next America's Cup regatta. The Prime Minister, Bill English, says it's yet to be seen whether the government will have any say on where the regatta is held. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
While the location for the 36th America's Cup has not been decided yet, Bill English says it's clear that hosting a regatta in New Zealand has the potential for significant economic benefits. He says with these kinds of events there are always discussions about how much involvement the government should have, and those talks will continue in the lead up to 2021. Mr English says Auckland will also be hosting an Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting that year, which will bring a whole set of demands and complications with it as well. Atuiti whare Pārimata ko Chris Bramwell aho.
The Arab nations that have slapped a boycott on Qatar have agreed to a 48-hour extension to meet a list of demands. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt accuse Qatar of supporting terrorism and being an ally of regional foe Iran. They had originally given Qatar until today to meet a list of demands or face further sanctions. The ultimatum includes shutting the broadcaster Al Jazeera, downgrading ties with Iran and closing a Turkish military base. Qatar's foreign minister has already signalled that the demands will be rejected, but that his country is ready to engage in dialogue under the right conditions. A study on the health needs of whānau in West Auckland has shown a huge need for better preventative services, especially mental health. The Whānau Centre Health Needs Assessment profiled the needs of more than 8,000 whānau who were enrolled at the Whānau Centre in Henderson. Y Research wanted to see how whānau ora was working and where it needed to provide better services. Researcher Dr. John Campbell says the study showed not many people would visit the doctor during working hours and the need for more mental health services.
Whānau Centre clients use mental health services at a rate that's almost 6 times higher than the rest of the DHB board population, particularly for youth. So that highlights that obviously we need more services to prevent the need for mental health services.
John Huako from Y Research. The government's long-awaited sea lion plan has set the goal of ending the mammal's endangered status. The Department of Conservation and Ministry for Primary Industries have been working on the sea lion threat management plan for more than 3 years. Almost 5,000 submissions were lodged during consultation last year, with many calling for the adoption of a stronger overall goal. Sea lions are in the most endangered nationally critical category because there are fewer than 12,000 left. The final version of the Sea Lion Plan sets the goal of halting its decline within 5 years and increasing the population within 20 years. A mini pistol crossbow that shoots sharpened toothpicks or needles across a room has been declared unsafe, an unsafe toy by the Commerce Commission. It says anyone selling these will be in breach of the Fair Trading Act and they should be immediately removed from sale. The Commerce Commission says it first became aware of the mini pistol crossbows for sale on Trade Me last week. YouTube videos show these crossbows bursting a balloon and even a light bulb with a sharpened dart. They have become a craze in China and have been banned in some cities for safety reasons. It's 6:05. The veteran Warriors winger Manu Vatuvei is heading to England to play in the Super League competition, according to a British media report. Vatuvei is contracted to the Warriors until 2019. However, the Guardian newspaper says he will join Salford next year. The 31-year-old has played 14 seasons for the Warriors and scored 152 tries in 226 games since making his debut in 2004. However, he struggled for game time in the NRL's first grade over the past 2 years due to injury and form. A Warriors spokesperson says they're aware Vatuvei is weighing up his options but was unwilling to comment on the Salford reports. RNZ understands an announcement confirming the deal is due in the coming days. Two-time champion Petra Kvitova heads into Wimbledon as the favourite to win the women's singles in just 6 months after she was attacked with a knife. The number 11 seed was attacked by an intruder in her home in the Czech Republic, suffering injuries to her playing hand. Tonight she plays Johanna Larsson of Sweden, and despite the attack, Kvitova says she hasn't changed her style.
All my career I have to play very offensively. And there was a part of the time when I didn't play and I didn't play well, so I'm not sure if it is the results of what happened, but maybe I feel a little bit fearless, I think, because of what happened, and I'll find out what is important and what it's not.
And New Zealand's Marina Irakovic has a tough first-round match tonight against second seed Simona Halep. And Germany has won the Confederations Cup for the first time by beating Chile 1-0 in the final. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nice, the Trans-Siberian adventure of photographer Birgit Krippner, documenting one of the longest train journeys in the world and the people who live alongside the line. We have a window on the world of courage in Bangladesh, while our correspondent in Uganda, Tabu Bitagera, raves about some of his country's natural wonders. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland and Auckland showers heavy at times, easing this evening and becoming isolated tomorrow. Waikato to Wellington, Coromandel Peninsula, the Central High Country and Wairarapa. Showers, some heavy and possibly thundery, clearing by the evening. Tomorrow fine breaks and a few afternoon and evening showers. Bay of Plenty, Gisborne and Hawke's Bay. Occasional showers, some heavy and possibly thundery, mainly fine tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson. Occasional showers about Golden Bay and today, well, this evening and tomorrow. For Buller and Westland, showers spreading from the south this evening, clearing for Westland tomorrow morning. For Canterbury, mainly fine, but a period of rain tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain spreading north from this evening with snow lowering to 400 metres tonight, followed by showers, some heavy with hail and possible thunderstorms, and snow down to 200 metres during the morning. And for the Chatham Islands, rain easing to a few showers tomorrow morning. RNZ National, it's 6:08. You're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Thank you very much indeed, Anna Thomas. Let's go to the government and its $5 million cheque to help Team New Zealand keep key staff in the run-up to the next America's Cup. The government provided the same amount of money to the team following its defeat in San Francisco 4 years ago. Prime Minister Bill English says the funding will go some way towards protecting the valuable intellectual property, experience and skills that rest with key team members. We heard from the Prime Minister after 5. Let's go now to Mark Orams, the head of AUT's School of Sport and Recreation, who's been involved in 2 America's Cup campaigns and joins me now. Mark, you there?
Yeah, g'day, John.
How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. Bit of a chilly night down country, but I've just arrived home, so nice and warm back here in Torbay.
Right. Good old Torbay, eh?
Yes.
Now look, a lot of people on national radio, you even mention the America's Cup, and they get incensed and they say, "Rah, and other things, often more articulate than that, but I'm just paraphrasing. So let's talk about the financial benefit of having this event in Auckland. Roughly ballpark figure, what's it worth?
Oh, it's certainly worth a heck of a lot more than $5 million that the government has invested in retaining some of the talent. It certainly, when we hosted in 2000 and 2003, the benefit was estimated to be in the hundreds of millions. Now, that accrues across a whole variety of sectors, the hospitality and tourism sector, the marine sector, and also reputation. And the other part of it that's sort of perhaps an intangible is brand New Zealand internationally, and the opportunity to leverage that when we are playing in a high-tech game and showing that we're able to be successful on the world stage. That provides an enormous amount of opportunity for businesses internationally to market their products and to become successful. It opens a lot of doors. So there's no doubt that Team New Zealand's success in the America's Cup and other high-profile yachting events has been something that has delivered quite a large return on that investment over many, many decades.
Okay, let's talk about what the $5 million is for. It's basically to keep as many of the team involved in the team as possible, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And this was a very real risk. And just as how I suppose we've learned the lessons out of San Francisco, we needed to learn the lessons out of the successful defence of the America's Cup here for the first time in 2000. And then, of course, only 3 years later, the loss of the America's Cup. So we went from a 5-0 win and a dominating performance in 2000 to a 5-0 loss. And that turnaround was simply due to the loss of key personnel that were attracted offshore to compete for other syndicates against New Zealand. And so learning the lessons from that, retaining key people is absolutely critical to the potential success of Team New Zealand as a defender. And most importantly, and this is the thing that we need to remember longer term, if we defend the Cup successfully, we get to host it again. So there's a long-term game here in terms of keeping the talent within Team New Zealand,
right,
so that we can maximise our chances of a successful defence and then reaping the additional rewards that come from that longer term.
Who's the talent? Who would the foreign teams, who would Larry Ellison have had his chequebook out for example?
Well, the key people will be the key decision makers and the brains in the design team. So the engineers, the head of the design team, some of the key members within the shore crew as well, who are your typical hard-working but very, very talented and innovative Kiwis. They'd certainly be on the short list. And then the high-profile members of the sailing team and some of the coaching team as well, who are very, very experienced and astute players. So there will be a list that is perhaps not as long as the entire team itself, but certainly the key members within the team would be targeted. And, of course, what that does, if you're a now challenger for the America's Cup, it does two things. You get the double whammy. You get the talent, so you strengthen your team, and you take it away from the opponent, so you weaken them. So that's why it's the classic move for the big players who will want to or aspire to win the America's Cup and now take it away from New Zealand, is that's the classic play that they will try and make. I don't think it'll be successful this time, John. Even though they can wave a heck of a lot bigger checkbooks than any New Zealand government or supporter or sponsor can. This is a team that's really tight. It's a team that actually is not motivated by money. They're motivated by creating history, by being both true to their roots and their heritage as Kiwi yachties and Kiwis. And many of them have been involved in this team for multiple campaigns and have been through the dark times as well. And so they'll now want to really see this event coming up in New Zealand in, probably 4 years' time, most likely in Auckland. They'll want to see it be something really, really special, and they'll want to deliver a result that they can continue to be proud of. So, that core group within Team New Zealand are pretty tight.
Dr. Mark Orams, who is the head of the School of Sport and Recreation at AUT and has in fact worked on 2 America's Cup campaigns. Thank you, Mark. Very nice to talk to you. Saudi Arabia and 3 other Arab states have given Qatar a 48-hour extension to meet a list of demands or face further sanctions. Saudi Arabia and its allies, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and Egypt, accuse Qatar of supporting terrorism, being an ally of regional foe Iran and a whole lot of other things. They'd given Qatar until today to meet a list of demands, including shutting down its Al Jazeera news network or face further diplomatic and economic sanctions. CNN correspondent Jamona Karashid has this report from Doha on how the Qataris are reacting to the crisis.
4 years ago, Dana Fardan ended her singing career to focus on composing music. But as her country, Qatar, is facing an unprecedented crisis, it's time to act, she says.
All of a sudden, there was this embargo and we were blockaded. I wanted to get this message of love and unity and togetherness out, and I wanted to show this, to showcase the strength and our unwavering loyalty for our leader.
Along with some of Qatar's most known musical talents and a volunteer expatriate choir, they recorded the song One Nation.
Our home is being attacked, and we've got to stand up for ourselves. We've got to stand up for it. We've got to take ownership of our messaging. We've got to take ownership of our narrative. We've got to get this out there.
Qataris, like their government, feel the demands by the Saudi-led alliance, they say, aim to strip it of its sovereignty. On the streets of Doha, it feels like National Day, with what seem to be spontaneous shows of support for the country's leadership. The latest, this wall with the emir's now iconic image, where people leave messages of support and patriotism. 10-year-old Haya, perhaps too young to understand the politics behind this, says she's here to express her love for the emir and is proud of her country.
Under this crisis and this blockade, it's brought us together, and to see people do this from the grassroots, from bottom up, because it's not forced by the government, so it's I don't know, it's heartwarming to be here too with everyone.
The poster was put up by a Qatari businessman.
During the crisis, our government, I think they've done very well in handling the situation and providing a normal life, a continued normal life for people, for maintaining the standard of living in the country. So this is just the way for the people and for us to show our support to our government and to our leadership.
This sense of national pride is a sure sign that Qatar will not be backing down anytime soon.
That was CNN's Jamona Karashid in Doha. A waste sector lobby group wants rubbish levies raised more than 10 times to reduce the amount of waste ending up in the dump. The Waste Action Levy Group says New Zealand is one of the cheapest developed countries in the world for dumping rubbish, with the government's waste levy set at $10 per tonne. The group says increasing that levy to $140 per tonne would create 9,000 jobs and boost the country's economy by $500 million a year by 2025. Emma Hatton has more.
New Zealanders throw away 15.5 million tonnes of waste each year, recycling only slightly more than a quarter of it. A report released by the New Zealand Waste Action Levy Group recommends gradually increasing the government's waste levy to $140 per tonne and reinvesting that money in recycling infrastructure. The Chief Executive of Waste Management Institute New Zealand, Paul Evans, says the research shows such an increase would more than double the country's recycling rate, create thousands of jobs in the recycling industry, and boost economic growth by hundreds of millions of dollars.
In Auckland, as example, Auckland is setting up a resource recovery network, which is for people to go in and recycle things in a local hub. That creates a lot of jobs in terms of reuse markets, so there are reuse shops. And then there's the flow-on benefits as well, the engineering companies who are supplying recycling equipment and so on.
The $10 levy is additional to a landfill's own charges, which could be between $8 and $200 a tonne. But the group says only a fifth of the country's waste is currently levied. The Associate Minister for the Environment, Scott Simpson, says he wants that figure to rise. This morning he released a 3-yearly review of the waste disposal levy. It did not look at its price. Mr Simpson agrees too much waste ends up in the tip, but he wants a more nuanced approach than just raising the price.
I wouldn't like to, at this stage, get into a discussion about what the actual dollar and cents figure should be. But I think that using a single blunt price is probably not as nuanced or as sophisticated as we'd want to have long term to try and encourage a better reduction in landfill usage.
The Product Stewardship Council, an independent group of academic, scientists and consultants working to reduce waste, says increasing the cost of dumping rubbish has worked around the world. Its coordinator, Sandra Murray.
Anyone who works in waste understands that the $10 levy is far too low to have any beneficial impact on waste. And in order for us to grow and develop our recycling infrastructure and our recycling services, we need to make it so that landfill is not the cheapest option.
A Wellington City Councillor, Iona Pannett, says current charges leave no room to invest in effective recycling systems.
Any price increase is going to be challenging for some people, but the reality is, unless there is some change, our landfills are going to continue to cost us many, many millions of dollars for local authorities throughout the country. They're a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and we're losing the opportunity to recover valuable resources.
The Waste Action Levy Group is confident increasing the levy would stop 3 million tonnes of waste entering landfills each year, but it won't happen without political support. For Checkpoint, Ko Emma Hatton, aho.
6:19. Acid attacks are a particularly alarming and chilling form of violence, and they're on the rise around the world. Just today there was news out of India that a woman in the state of Uttar Pradesh was attacked with acid for a 5th time. It happened as she went into the garden of the women's refuge where she was supposed to be under round-the-clock protection. Halfway across the world, in London, more and more criminals using acid to maim and torture their victims. After a series of high-profile incidents, almost 250,000 people have signed a petition calling on the British government to make acid harder to come by. The BBC's Jonathan Savage has this report.
Earlier this month, Resham Khan and his cousin Jamil Mukhtar were driving in a car in East London. As they stopped at traffic lights, a man they'd never seen before approached them.
He had some sort of liquid bottle and he just started squeezing it. Within seconds, my cousin started screaming. Her eyes had blistered, her face started melting. My face started melting, my shorts started sticking to me, there was smoke coming out of the seats.
Resham and Jamil are among more than 1,800 Londoners to have been attacked with acid in the last 7 years. Between 2015 and 2016, the number of reported attacks went up by 74%. Corrosives like bleach and sulfuric acid are easy to come by, and unlike a knife or a gun, are not illegal to carry around. They're also much harder to trace back to the perpetrators. Jamil is still in hospital awaiting an operation. Resham was in an induced coma for 2 days.
I can't hear from this ear. This arm is a mess. My front chest, my belly, my back, my legs. And I looked in the mirror once and I just sat there and cried. I'm going to be scarred for life. I can't walk properly. I can't hear properly. I keep thinking this guy's going to come for me. I'm having nightmares. I'm screaming, I'm sweating.
The petition urges the British government to allow only people with a licence to buy dangerous acids. Sarmad Ismail set it up. He believes as the victims are often Asian, the attacks don't get the attention they deserve.
I feel like the mainstream media does brush these incidents under the carpet. You know, this is increasing day by day now, and there should be a law put in place. And this seems to be happening more on Muslim people, and it shouldn't be happening to anyone.
The police are treating the attack on Jamil and Resham as a hate crime, motivated by racism. Resham agrees.
There's no reason why this wouldn't be racially motivated. I don't know this guy. I've never seen this guy in my life. I don't have any problems with anybody.
Police figures show that corrosive fluids have been used in murders, robberies and rapes, but the vast majority of cases never go to trial.
Jonathan Savage with that report from London. Let's head home again. Māori radio DJ Pat Spellman is putting his body online using social media to document his weight struggle. He's not alone. Almost 1 in 3 New Zealand adults are obese. Almost 1 in 3. When it comes to Māori, that figure rises to nearly half. Pat's weight hasn't only affected his physical well-being, it also led to depression, which saw him hit rock bottom last year. Shannon Haunui-Thompson went to meet Pat Spellman as part of RNZ's election series, Is This the Brighter Future?
Yes! Grind him!
Last year, Pat Spellman tipped the scales at 190 kilos, and being that heavy wasn't just physically holding him down.
I was at the bottom of my world. Whānau, friends, career over, broke, struggling. Huge, biggest I've ever been, chins on chins on chins. It was ridiculous. Which is when I realised, and this is the question that I'm sure so many people ask, am I depressed or am I just feeling sorry for myself? You know, is this a result of my own doing?
230 kgs. Yes!
Since the start of the year, 26-year-old Pat has been working out at the gym 3 times a week. Pat believes diet, diabetes and depression are all linked and can all potentially lead to another fatal D.
I found that there was this connection of, I call it 4 Ds really for young Māori men. Diet or lack thereof, a positive diet, a good diet, which is my size. You know, the reason I'm big is because of what I eat, or a lack of physical activity, positive physical activity. So just diet, which leads to diabetes, being pre-diabetic, a situation that affects many young Māori men. The stats will tell you that, which then I suppose leads to depression, which is the mental health, because of the fact that I was big, which obviously caused the diabetes issue for me, which led to me sort of feeling down and out, and then obviously with all the other personal issues compacted on top of the health issues led to a serious sort of depression mode. And then the 4th D is the eventual death. I mean, for some people that depression leads to suicide, which is the obvious leads to death, but for some other people it's health that gets you there. So I suppose I looked into it and I thought, well, I'm experiencing these 3 things which will eventually, if I don't change my ways, lead to the 4th, which is death. I call it death row. And because I'm a creative native, I refer to myself as, I thought, how could I use these triggers or these things, these attributes about my life and use it as a way to share my story and also the expertise of people that work in those specific areas to go on the road, talk to rangatahi Māori, especially young men, when it comes to depression and suicide, especially young Māori families when it comes to diabetes and better diets. And I thought, well, actually, the more people I speak to in my circle, the more prominently kind of obvious this is, especially with young natives.
Pat decided to share his healthy hikoi to help keep himself accountable and to help others who are struggling with their weight and depression.
Until you genuinely believe that you're worth it, you can be depressed forever. And so it wasn't until the latter end of 2016 when I thought, actually, I'm going to give this a go. And I'm gonna invest in myself. I can't help any of these kaupapa that I'm standing up for until I help myself. You know, not only trying to encourage rangatahi Māori to vote. Well, I probably would have been a little bit more successful if I was able to stand there for longer than 30 seconds and speak without having to take a break.
Pat is still working out every week, taking his healthy hikoi 1 step at a time. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Shannon Haunui-Thompson, aho.
Go, Pat. Finally tonight, what is the best or most humane way to kill a baby possum? We're asking that because Drury School in southern Auckland has come under fire from the SPCA after it drowned possum joeys in a bucket during annual fundraising possum hunt. Our reporter Eva Corlett talked to a professor of veterinary neurophysiology at Massey University, Craig Johnson, about the thorny topic of exterminating the baby pests.
We have research that suggests that they become aware of their surroundings at around about 120 days in the pouch phase. And at that stage, they are recognisable as animals, but they're still very undeveloped. They still don't have fur, and their eyes are open and they can hear, but they're not what you would think of when you think of a possum kind of crawling around in the undergrowth, if you see what I mean. They're not independently viable animals at that stage.
So let's say you were hunting, you killed a mother, and then you find joeys in her pouch. What do you do?
I think animals like that would be okay to be left, to be honest. I mean, that's what you would do if you happened to kill a pregnant mammal with a fetus at a very undeveloped stage, and that the evidence says that those animals don't achieve awareness, and so there's no welfare impact in leaving them where they are. In terms of the animals that are obviously aware, that are active and that are behaving in a way that suggests they're aware, then those animals need to be euthanized in the same way that you would euthanize a sick or an injured animal that you happened across.
What then is the most humane technique?
The Animal Welfare Act for pest animals doesn't usually specify the methods of killing. There are all sorts of different methods, but I would suggest that if you have access to a gun, then a gun would be a very good way to kill an animal humanely.
And if you don't have a gun?
Well, if you don't have access to a gun, it really depends on the facilities and the expertise that you've got. We talk about blunt force trauma to the head as an acceptable way to kill animals in emergency situations, but you need to have skills with that. If you don't do it properly, then it becomes a very bad way to kill an animal. And so it's probably better, if you're not confident with the means of killing an animal, not to put yourself in a situation where you would come across that animal in an environment where it would need to be killed. So this school fundraiser drowned the joeys. What do you make of that method? I don't think I've ever seen anybody suggest that drowning is a humane way to kill an animal at any stage of its life cycle. Terrestrial animals have a huge drive to breathe, and when we talk to people that have that drive prevented in some way, maybe because they've had an asthma attack or maybe because they were in a near-drowning situation, or if they have a medical disease, they report that as being extremely unpleasant and tending towards panic attacks and making them feel, out of control and panicked. And so the assumption is that animals that are aware of their surroundings would have that same drive to breathe and would suffer those same negative experiences if they were subjected to drowning.
Massey University's Craig Johnson talking to Eva Corlett, ending our program for tonight. Thank you for being with us on behalf of everyone on the Checkpoint team, and we hope to see you again tomorrow night right here at 5 o'clock.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Crown says there is limited scope for a court to review the compensation paid to Taina Pora for wrongful imprisonment. The $5 million the taxpayers are giving Team New Zealand is to keep key staff on board for the next America's Cup regatta. A study shows that prevention is far better than the cure, especially when it comes to mental health. And a long-awaited sea lion plan aims to get the sea mammal off the endangered list. Our next news and weather is at 7.
If you think RNZ has breached formal standards either on air or in our online content, you have the right to make a formal complaint. This must be made in writing to the broadcaster first, within 20 working days of the broadcast. To find out about those standards or to lodge a complaint, go to rnz.co.nz and type formal complaint into our